If you only knew how many cupcakes I ate before filming this video, you would be worried about my health. 12. 12 cupcakes. But they're really small! I needed something to pump me up for filming, and that's what it was. Hi guys, and welcome back to Slice of Mike. I hope you missed me. I'm very glad to be back in the hot seat filming a video for you guys. Today I'm talking about the books that I read in the month of May, and I also have a giveaway that I will be telling you more about towards the end of the video. So stick around and learn how you can win 2 books completely free of charge. That's the best deal that I can offer you this video, so let's keep moving. The first book that I read in the month of May is My Brother's Husband by Kengoro Tagame. This is a book about a single father living in Japan who has a daughter, and then towards the beginning of the book, he finds out that his brother, who moved to Canada a long time ago and died a while ago as well, was married to this guy in Canada, and then he comes to visit the family in Japan, and they learn about each other because they've never met before, they didn't know each other existed, and it's also a really great story about how Japanese people view the LGBT community and some of the challenges that LGBT people face in Japan, and just an interesting perspective on something that I didn't know a lot about, because obviously living in the US, I know how LGBT people are treated here, more or less, but in Japan, I didn't really know what the situation was, and it turns out that it's kind of different than I thought. So this was an eye-opening read, and I felt like it was really realistic. Obviously, the author and illustrator himself is Japanese, and I believe he's gay as well. Jury's out on that, but he might be gay. Who knows? He is definitely Japanese, that is for sure, and I felt like it had a very authentic feel to it. It felt very much like a story that could take place or might be taking place right now in contemporary Japan. It was a very small scale story. There's only a few characters and you follow them for most of the book, but I felt like it was pretty enjoyable and pretty realistic, and I will probably pick up the second volume when that comes out. Also, I don't think I made it clear, this is actually a graphic novel, so it's completely done in black and white ink, and it is very attractive, but it's a graphic novel, if you didn't know that before. The next book that I read is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty series. I don't know what it is recently, but I've been reaching for fantasy and sci-fi more than I ever have before, probably because I'm looking for an escape, TBH, from the things that are happening around me. But anyways, I am really appreciative of immersive fantasies, things that have really well-told stories and really well-drawn characters, and this is definitely a new entry for me in that canon of books that fit that criteria. To give you a sense of what the feel of this is, because I think the selling point of the series is that it's told from a different perspective than we're used to, because a lot of the fantasies, a lot of the epic fantasies, especially if you think like Game of Thrones, there's this very medieval quality to it. This book draws from Eastern and also, I want to say Polynesian myths. I'm not really sure what the specifics are. I don't know if the author meant to pull from specific real-life mythology and religion, but it definitely feels like there is some root either in Polynesia or East Asia or some part like that that is the inspiration behind the characters and the religious figures in this book. There are elements of fantasy, but then there's also lots of drawn-out conflict. So actually it's probably like Game of Thrones in that regard, where there's a lot of war, and there's a lot of war tactics, and there's a lot of battles that take place. So if you don't like that aspect of Game of Thrones, then you're probably not going to like this. But if you do like Game of Thrones and you're looking for something that has a different flavor or a different feel to it, then I would definitely recommend this, because I enjoyed the uniqueness of the perspective here. I enjoyed reading about characters and cultures that were different than what I'd been used to reading in fantasy, so I do recommend it. The only negative thing that I would say about this book is that it is super weirdly paced. Nothing takes more than 2 or 3 pages to explain, and then you're on to the next thing, and it could be years down the line, it could be miles in a different island altogether, but it floats around and it tells its own thing, and it's a very, I guess, ethereal story. Like, it doesn't have a lot of well-grounded reference points. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it just wasn't what I was expecting, because when you reach for a book that is 600 pages long, you don't really expect to be wanting more from the book or wanting more pages describing each scene, but I did kind of feel that way. So I guess it's a good sign, but I also think it's important to know going into this book that it's a little different, probably, than what you're used to. The next book that I read in the month of May is The Singer's Gun by Emily St. John Mandel, who is my favorite author for having written Station 11, which is the best book ever written, hands down, no argument. Don't even try to argue with me about that statement, because it's not possible. Overall, I would say that I enjoyed it. It obviously has a much different flavor than Station 11 because it's not post-apocalyptic, and it's more of a hard-boiled detective thriller. Before Emily St. John Mandel wrote Station 11, her genre tended to be more of like a mystery thriller type thing. So there's more of a gritty crime element to it than I was perhaps expecting or used to from her. This book takes some getting used to. I will say that. I was very, very confused in the beginning. The story is told in split perspectives, and it also goes back in time, which, depending on the way the author introduces those elements, it can be pretty hard to follow along. And so I was a little lost in the beginning, and I wasn't enjoying it up until maybe like page 100, 150, which is, already about halfway through the book. But even so, it's compelling in that I wanted to read it, and I was eventually drawn into the story and became a fan of the characters, but there was a shaky beginning, and I think that's only because I was coming from Station 11, which is, like I've said 3 times in this video now, my favorite book of all time. So it's very possible that I was disappointed slightly in the level of writing here, but it's still a very well-written story. It's still very, very fun to read. I would say if you're looking for a summer read, this is really good because a lot of the book takes place in Italy, and it's kind of a Mediterranean setting, kind of a vacation vibe, like a dark vacation vibe. So if you're on the beach and you're looking for a shorter, quick-paced read, I think this would be really appropriate. The next book that I read in the month of May is Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castel. This was a book that I wanted to read because Wild West meets magic is a huge selling point for me. I think that is the best combination that you could ever come up with, ever. This book starts off in a typical fashion, being about a character named Kellen, who is part of a magical community, except he doesn't have magical powers, or they're very, very weak, and he's not sure what to do, because there is a test, like a coming-of-age test, where if he fails it, he will then become part of the non-magical subclass in his community. So obviously he doesn't want that to happen. So this book is about Kellen dealing with that aspect of himself and meeting a mysterious figure in the form of this girl who's named Farius Parfax, and she's kind of the gunslinger type character of the book. She does not have a gun though. She has this deck of cards that she whips at people, which I've always thought is like the coolest way to kill someone. If you're gonna do it with a deck of cards. I can honestly say that I've tried it a few times, not to kill people, but like tried to fling cards at things. Haven't quite gotten the art of flinging cards at people effectively, but it's still really fun. So I was drawn to her character initially because of the card flinging. I'm a little interested in how the author chose these 2 main characters, because this one, from my understanding, Farius Parfax, is older than this character, so there's absolutely no chance for romantic interaction. I get the sense that she's like 25, 26, probably like closer to my age, and this kid is, I think, 16. So it's interesting that the author chose to have these characters with wildly different ages to be the focal points of a story. I did really enjoy this, but I do have to say that I was disappointed in the way the story actually turned out and the way that the story was told. This book has only a slight shade of the Wild West. So if you're coming to this expecting like gunslingers meets mages, it's probably not going to be anything as awesome as what you're expecting. It is still a really good story, but I think it kind of does an injustice in the way that it's branded, because you go into it thinking that you're going to get this, like I said, Wild West fantasy novel, and it's kind of presented differently than that. I think there's probably only 1 or 2 other stories that I've read in the Wild West that also have a magical element. I'm sure there's a ton out there. I just haven't come across any. So for me, this felt like new territory to explore, and I liked it overall. It's part of a series. I think the next book comes out this fall. It's called Shadow Black. I'm looking forward to it. I'm interested to see how things play out based on the first book. There's a lot of setup in the first book, as is pretty common to the first books in fantasy series. So I am expecting really good things from book 2, so stay tuned for more. And the last book that I have to talk about today is Steeplejack by A.J. Hartley, which is a book about a girl named Aang. Aang is a steeplejack, which means she climbs really tall buildings and spires, and she fixes chimneys and takes care of building defects that other people couldn't access because they're so high up. Obviously, it's a dangerous job to have, so most steeplejacks do not live that long. She's one of the oldest steeplejacks out there, and she's one of the best. So she builds a reputation for herself, but obviously being good at what you do draws unwanted attention sometimes. So Aang's life becomes in danger, and she has to find out who killed somebody else that she knows before harm can come to her or anyone else in her life. There are a few main reasons why I enjoyed this book so much. Number 1, there is no romance in it, which might not seem like a big thing, and it might even make it seem like it's not a good thing to have in a book, but for me at least, I personally just don't love reading about romance in YA fantasy, because a lot of the times these characters are fighting for their lives, and I'm thinking, if I'm fighting for my life, I'm not really looking on OkCupid to find somebody to go on a date with. Like, it's not really the time to develop romantic attractions. I'm trying to stay alive. So I was happy to see that this character was focusing more on her survival than on boyfriends. Not saying you can't be strong and focus on multiple things and also have a good, healthy love life, because obviously that's the goal. But as far as the story and as far as the reason why I read YA fantasy, which is to escape and to learn more about worlds that don't exist but probably would be really great if they did, I just don't love reading about romance in situations like that. So happily for me, there was no romantic element in this book. The other reason why I like this book is that it feels very much like an Indiana Jones or National Treasure type mystery where there's just people jumping around various buildings and trying to outrun each other and all that kind of stuff happening among ruins and artifacts and the older aspects of human society, and there's just a really cool vibe to it. I wasn't really aware until towards the end of the book that the story is supposed to take place in South Africa, but it's a cyberpunk version of South Africa, so you have animals that don't exist and cultures that don't exist, and obviously buildings and technologies that do not exist, and they're all tied together in, I guess, South Africa. I have never read a book that takes place in South Africa, so I just wasn't really sure what was going on there, but apparently there is a little seed of truth in this book, which is supposed to be South Africa, but the majority of the book is just a fun fantasy romp, and it feels very adventurous, very lighthearted, but also very tense at times. So I definitely liked it. And there is a second book in the series, which I have not yet gotten to, but it's called Firebrand. The sequel explores more of the world where Aang lives, and she also has another conflict that she has to solve. Obviously, after the conflict of the first book is resolved, more comes to light, and she just gets deeper and deeper into the rat's nest. So I think this is a really interesting series. It's from Torteen. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm hosting a giveaway, and the giveaway includes 1 copy of Steeplejack and 1 copy of the sequel, which is Firebrand. So if you're interested in entering this giveaway, all you have to do is comment below and say, I want to enter. Doesn't really matter what you say. Just leave a comment of any nature so I know that you're interested in winning. And at the end of the giveaway, I will choose a winner, and then Tor will happily send you the first 2 books in this series. That's going to be it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you've read any of the books that I've talked about today, please leave a comment below in the comment section and let me know what you thought of them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you'll enter the giveaway as well, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye.